Welcome everybody to today's talk. We're having this short interview with Alinafe Irene Nonhlanhla. So yes, it's on the USAID funds freeze that we've been hearing about. And we had this opportunity to get some insider views or a broader perspective on this matter. And for this, Alinafe will assist us. Alinafe, thank you very much for joining us. We have asked you for this interview because this topic of the freeze of the USAID has been hitting people differently in so many countries and ways. We, as Tanzania Network, have also been wondering what exactly happened. Why the freeze? Why so sudden? Is it for all USAID programs? Some programs, can some programs go on or not? Like, what is all this? And we're hoping that you could shed some light on it. And I would like to give you the word now. You can give a brief introduction of yourself and maybe just give us a broad picture on this.
All right. So thank you very much for inviting me. My name is Alinafe Irene Nonhlanhla Gama. A gender development practitioner and Heinrich Böll Stiftung fellow, and I'm also currently studying for my master's in gender and development. So yes, the funding cuts were very abrupt. And I think it came for many as a shock. Of course, yes, we know in the previous term, there were some funding cuts that were done, but I think many did not see the impact of it, and it wasn't as how it was now. I know for Malawi, we saw so many projects come to halt, people being put to like leave to say that, okay, maybe when things happen. I know recently, if we did a study to see like the impact of what has happened, and just a simple example was that 4,451 health workers, most of them who were serving HIV people, lost their jobs. So you can already start seeing that the health sector being affected very, very much so. And I think for a country like Malawi, over 50%, I think when we looked into the health funding, we realized that over 50% of the funding came in from the US government. Wow. If you look at the OECD DAC, you will see that World Bank in Malawi ranks number one, but right next to World Bank was the US. So like the US was the biggest bilateral donor that Malawi had. Currently with the funding freeze, it's now kind of looking like, okay, Germany is coming in to be like the top, but with the other countries also coming in down there. But we can say that other countries will now come in and absorb these huge and big, massive changes that have come in because of the US budget cuts. So it has affected the education sector, but also at the same time, seeing as the money that was coming in through bilateral projects, but also even the money that was coming in through expatriate jobs, the contracting, maybe even with private sector who were supplying the goods that were needed into these projects. That also means that Forex being affected. Like I know there was mention of sums of maybe 360 million, which was coming in 2020, 2023. And then there was at a point like 290 something million. So which means that currently studies are showing that Malawi is going to lose like 177 million US dollars in 2025 in Forex. And this is a country that's already struggling with Forex issues. So it means that for us to now come out of that, it's going to be even more hard. And also, if you look at the past 5 years, we've been a country which has been hit with a lot of climatic shocks, cyclones, droughts, dry spells, and being a country that relies on agriculture, that also simply means that we're suffering. So in as much as we have goals to say in 2063, our focus is agriculture, tourism, and mining, but with our infrastructures already failing because of the road networks, and now the cuts in the health sector, people will probably now start the jobs that are being lost. And even if you look in the social protection, people will now probably start using negative coping mechanisms. I know for some projects, rumors per se, we don't have the actual list of which projects have now come back, because there's some humanitarian projects that have now said that they're resurrecting, but it's not in the same way that they were.
Okay. Would you also know the effects on Tanzania? Because you've given us a good light with numbers on Malawi.
For Tanzania per se, I don't think I would have the actual figures, because I know for Malawi there was like actually a study that was really done to say, okay, we're here, how is it going to be like? But I think the other thing that arose in terms of Tanzania and Malawi recently, so Malawi seeing that as we're struggling in a way of trying to see that there was a lot of banning of some trade materials, and there was a bit of wrangle between Malawi and Tanzania. So, like, Tanzania reiterated to say that, okay, if there's a trade ban from your side, we're also going to ban from our side. Agricultural imports are not going to come in. And Malawi is a landlocked country. So, we either use Tanzania or Mozambique, meaning that any effect. But luckily now, the Foreign Affairs sat down with Tanzania, and then they resorted that. But I think also just today in the news, I saw, now we're talking of Tanzania, but I also saw in the news in Zambia saying that you said is now like the US is wiping out all the health projects because of corruption. So if you see these countries, so that news just came about to say that there's been a lot of corruption in the health sector. So if you see Malawi, Tanzania, Zambia, and then Mozambique also, aside from that, there's most times there's a little bit of unrest. And then if you look at the whole region, one thing that's happening in the neighboring country has an impact. Because if you say you're cutting fund from Zambia, Zambians will probably try to start seeking help from Malawi and the other neighboring countries. So the impact does not only affect one country, it also affects SADC. And I know, yes, in the Africa as well, the whole AU in general, it also trickle down and also has effect in that way.
Yeah. Alinafe, were you also able to find out why this freeze had been set up this time so sudden? Was there maybe any reason for it?
For me, I feel like we weren't listening so much when the campaigns in the US were happening. People did not really pay enough attention, because I feel like the freeze and the cuts were some of the promises that were made to the American people. To some extent, people would actually say that, no, we don't blame them, they're putting their people first, but we're a global village. I usually say that, especially the SADC part of Africa, which is like down below, gets all usually the negative that comes. So if we look at maybe the upper side has got climatic shocks, everything will still trickle down to down this side. So in the global village that we're in, and also looking at that, most of the trade issues have to do with the US dollar. Definitely whatever happens in the US and also in the maybe in the countries that have superpowers have an effect on us. But maybe we just didn't pay attention to it much, and maybe start to now devise ways and plans of how to curb and also maybe be resilient in such to like such cuts, because it's not only the US that's cutting funding. I know one of the most amazing countries that I've ever thought of, who are very keen on gender and feminist development, Netherlands, did cut funding for
as well.
So including gender funding. So at least for them, it was strategic. They actually did give timelines and how that's going to be cut. For other countries, they've been hinting it now to say that we are probably moving towards maybe militarization. We're moving to this, but this wasn't done in a way that it was strategic to actually even give people time.
Yeah. Now, coming to what you've said, one of the reactions you already mentioned, that people said they don't blame USA because they're looking after their people, their countries. And you also mentioned resilience and ways to curb. How did governments or countries react towards these freezing? And are there any plans down the way on how to curb this loss now? And are there maybe also some voices that are saying, now this is the time for us to start being more independent rather than so much dependent?
Yeah, I know. I can't remember which country per se in Africa, but the president actually asked health workers who had actually lost their jobs to volunteer, and asked to say that, can you be able to volunteer so that we don't get to lose in the health sector? But Also, there have been countries. I think we've seen issues in Mali. We've seen the other president in one of the African countries, Ibrahim Traore, who's like now saying that, you know what, for Africans right now, let's start using the resources that we have now to create better resources for ourselves, to build back better for ourselves. So, in as much as these cuts are there, I would also start to say that yes, voices are arising, to say that why don't we then also start to look inward, and also what is the role of our multilateral bodies? We've got AU, we've got ECOWAS, we've got SADC, and then all the other regions that are already there. What roles do they have to play now to unite Africa, in a sense that we start also building from our own and building back better? I know for my country, I think that's why trade wise they said, okay, can we try to buy Malawi more so that we can also make our produce more, find ways to export. The IFRI research paper that was written talked about maybe reducing the bans for export. So let's be able to lessen the whole, like the hoops that one has to jump through to export things. We can try to explore the African Free Trade Continental Area. Have ways where we need resources outside from Africa, but maybe we build more from within and engage each other in better trade. And also it also could be ideal to look in a way that, you know, have open borders to each other, in sense of trade, in sense of access. But sometimes it kind of feels like within ourselves we've actually put in hurdles and curbs that we fail to navigate within the continent.
Okay, so you think that this could be a catalyst?
Yes, I do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
To be more self-reliant and towards an independent Africa. But still,
Yes.
the effects are still there and people are feeling them.
Yes, the effects are there. And I know we might feel them more later, because I think, yes, maybe the funding cuts have happened. Some of the things are happening gradually. But then the impact of this, because if you look at the money that was being talked about, like 177 million, that's enough for imports for like 3 weeks or so for the country, if you look at the country's budget. So if that has an effect of that sort, and if it keeps going, we are a country where 10% or less are employed, and also most in employment poverty. So if people have actually also lost their jobs, maybe others that were also part of projects that were actually trying to help people build people's resilience, now it's like we've been pushed a little bit back. And studies are showing that by 2030, we might have additional over 500,000 people being added to being in the levels of extreme poverty.
Wow. There's one more fear that I would like to address here. The funding of the ARVs for HIV positive people. Some governments have voiced out, like Tanzania, that those medications are still going to be provided for free. But could you like maybe clarify on that aspect? Is the worry the same also in neighboring countries like Malawi?
Yeah, the worry is still the same, but I'm hoping when the US said that humanitarian is still going to be part and go, I would hope that the ART treatment is part of that humanitarian talk, because we're talking about lives of people. We're talking about a huge number. I know for Malawi is almost over 1 million people that are living with HIV. So imagine across the world, if we do start thinking of making ARTs for sale. Yes, for some people would say that people need to be buying them. We need to capitalize on this. But from my also gender humanitarian perspective, that would also be a crime against humanity.
Okay.
Because this is like, what about those that cannot afford?
Yeah.
Does that mean that now we're leaving people to die?
Speaking of crime against humanity, are there any legal actions pursued towards the sudden withdrawal of the US aid or other programs? Because we've been hearing things, we're not so sure on the side of the US.
From our side, I'm not really, but I think during the time that we were at CSW, we could hear that some judge in the US is trying to stop some of the bans, but it's not knowledge that we have there in paper to say that okay, this is actually happening. Some of it were probably rumors, but I guess we'll just wait and see if that gets to be something that really happens.
Okay, so you're also not very much conversant with the challenges in
Yes.
the pursuit of legal actions. Yeah, so what next now? How are people working on these programs? They cannot be doing this on volunteer basis for too long.
And that is true. I know for some of the development partners, there have been so many talks to see how they're going to work. We can say now that maybe the Germans or the Irish and several others will now pick up where the US stopped, because it's actually even a lot of money that was being pumped in by the US. At the same time, also, we can't just expect now other countries to pull in. We also now need to start thinking of how are we also pulling in our sources to join in, to say that, okay, in terms of development cooperation, this is how things need to look like. In terms of our country per se, we need to now start developing strategies, implementable strategies, not just paper-based strategies of how we are going to mitigate this, and also do a risk assessment. And even from ourselves, like a proper SWOT analysis, like, okay, for our countries, for the region, where can we draw opportunities? What are our strengths, and where can we draw more? And I know one of the areas that I feel like for Malawi would do so well is the topic of mining, which is already topic on the Agenda 2063. Yes, so we already have things that we say that this is how we unlock ourselves and move out of poverty. So if maybe we can enhance that better, not only that, but also build systems that are strong against corruption. Because if we can see that taxpayers' money has been used from other countries to help us, and then later on you start hearing that people were corrupt and used it in the wrong way. So we need to now also start having better checks and balances on how we're using public finance. Yeah.
You mean that now broadly, because many international people are involved in these programs. I mean, it's not just
it's not
so,
just
yeah. So do you just said, yeah, we need to look from within now, but I'm sure there are some people who are thinking now we can look at other donors, other people to support us. What is your take on this? What could this freeze mean for European stakeholders, maybe, that are involved in development cooperation? Or is there potential for other countries to step in to fill the gap?
For me, yes. For me, that's why I mentioned also the risk assessment, because we can say Africa should then only rely on donors. We can say that they should now come and just fill the gap. We also now also need to start seeing which parts of the holes in the gap can we fill for ourselves, and then have the other partners come in. Yes, this can also be a chance for other partners to come in, and hoping that the topics stay the same. Because I know with development cooperation, it has to do with topics that countries will agree on. So it might be that others will say that no, health is a priority area for us. Others will say that no, we are not for health. For us, it's just climate change, because we would rather heal the climate. Some would say, oh, others will say that, oh, us is on maybe public finance or social protection. So we can't just assume that because one has left, the other ones can come and fill the gap. But we also have to also start finding measures. But yes, this is also an opportunity, maybe for the EU and also other development countries to also step in and say that, okay, maybe you can take part. Yeah.
Okay. Wow. Thank you so much for this broad way that you have addressed this topic, and the opportunities, challenges, and risks that you just assessed in such a short time. Yes, thank you so much for this interview.
You're welcome.